a kid that, surprisingly enough, never got in no trouble regardless of where he came from, you know. I'm talking about his later years.
Few figures in boxing have combined expertise, loyalty, and raw passion like Lou Duva. Known as the voice in the corner who could make champions fight smarter and fiercer, Duva's presence demanded attention. He wasn't the type to stay silent if he thought his fighter had been wronged. He didn't just manage careers, he protected lives and legacies. But loyalty can also breed friction.
Good goal. And Leonard nailed him and Roberto just shook his head.
Over decades in the ring, Duva encountered opponents who tested his patience, principles, or his fighter's resilience. The word hated here reflects intense competitive resentment, fueled by controversial decisions, perceived disrespect, or clashing personalities.
Offensively, he seems to have it all his own way. I don't know why he waits so long, but I think that's what Manny Stewart's talking about.
That one hurt.
These 6 boxers were the ones who pushed Duva to his limit, those whose victories or reputations he openly criticized or whose actions enraged him because they went against his core belief that boxing should reward skill, effort, and integrity above all else. In this video, we explore the 6 boxers who brought out the fiercest, loudest, and most passionate side of Lou Duva. The man who, in and out of the ring, never backed down from defending what he believed was right. 1. Sugar Ray Leonard. One of Lou Duva's most infamous moments involved none other than Sugar Ray Leonard. After Leonard's 1988 fight against Duva's fighter Donnie Lalonde, controversy ignited. Lalonde was stopped, but Duva believed Leonard had overstepped by landing extra shots after the bell.
That was hurt. I mean, Benitez was hurt.
Fueled by his protective instincts, Duva stormed toward Leonard in the ring. Here, his legendary slip and tumble during that charge became a memorable moment, symbolizing his fiery nature and refusal to allow injustice. Duva's frustration wasn't personal hatred. It was instinctive defense of his fighter. Leonard's fame and skill meant that a perceived infraction would go unnoticed by most, but not by Duva.
Against the ropes, Leonard landing at will. Let's hope they don't stop the bounce. And the line goes down.
The anger in that split second encapsulated decades of boxing experience, where fighters, no matter how legendary, could sometimes exploit loopholes or lapses in enforcement. Duva's reaction reflected his deep sense of fairness and loyalty. Even years later, this event was cited as an example of Duva's intensity. Fans and commentators remember it as a blend of chaos, commitment, and pure cornerman passion. To Duva, defending his fighter was non-negotiable. And if that meant confronting one of the sport's biggest stars head-on, so be it. That night highlighted the intensity and principles that defined Lou Duva's career. 2. Felix Trinidad. Lou Duva's relationship with Felix Trinidad was defined largely by frustration over controversial scorecards. When Duva-trained fighters faced Trinidad, he openly criticized judges for favoring the aggressive, popular fighter over those who displayed technical mastery. Duva believed boxing politics often tipped in favor of stars with charisma or marketing appeal, and Trinidad, at his peak, represented that system. Duva valued clean, tactical boxing above spectacle. When rounds were awarded to Trinidad despite perceived dominance by his own fighters, Duva publicly expressed his displeasure. For these disputes were a mix of principle and personal pride. To him, allowing such decisions to stand unchallenged would undermine the sport and disrespect the hard work of his cornered athletes. Although Duva respected Trinidad as a fighter, his fiery nature could not accept outcomes that seemed unjust. His criticism reinforced his image as a manager and trainer who would speak truth to power regardless of fame. For years, this tension between Duva and Trinidad lingered, reminding fans that boxing's politics often clash with pure talent. In Duva's eyes, fighting was about skill and fairness, and any deviation from that norm sparked his legendary fury. 3. Oscar de la Hoya. When Oscar de la Hoya emerged as boxing's golden boy in the 1990s, he brought immense talent, charisma, and promotional machinery. But Lou Duva, an old-school trainer who valued merit above marketing, found himself frustrated with the treatment of his fighters in De La Hoya bouts. Duva believed that judges and promoters sometimes favored the bigger star, leaving skilled underdogs at a disadvantage. Throughout these contests, Duva was outspoken, never hesitating to question decisions and call out perceived favoritism. He publicly expressed that his fighters had been denied recognition due to De La Hoya's commercial draw rather than their performance inside the ring. Duva's critiques were less about personal disdain and more about principle. Boxing should reward ability, not hype. This philosophical clash made De La Hoya a target of Duva's most public frustrations. The Golden Boy represented everything Duva resisted: the commercialization of scoring and the elevation of charisma over skill. While Duva respected De La Hoya's talent, he was unwilling to accept what he saw as unfair advantages. This tension exemplified Duva's relentless commitment to his fighters and his unwavering belief in integrity above spectacle. 4. Bernard Hopkins. Bernard Hopkins, known for his psychological tactics and calculated aggression, often crossed paths with Lou Duva's camp. Their clashes were less about the fights themselves and more about personalities. Duva's loyalty to his fighters meant that any mental games or perceived disrespect became deeply personal. Hopkins thrived on provocation and pre-fight mind games, which Duva interpreted as affronts to his fighters' honor. And their exchanges in press conferences and pre-fight events were heated, revealing the fiery intersection of two strong-willed figures. Duva never shied away from defending his corner verbally or strategically. This rivalry exemplified the human side of boxing, how clashes of temperament can rival physical battles in intensity. Duva's hatred stemmed from principle, not animosity. He saw Hopkins' tactics as a challenge to fairness and respect in the sport, which were sacred to him. Their interactions underscored Duva's reputation as a man whose loyalty and passion often put him at odds with even the most respected opponents. 5. Shane Mosley. Shane Mosley's fights during Duva's era sometimes left lingering bitterness, especially when decisions were close or controversial. Duva was quick to question scoring whenever he believed his fighter had been outboxed but not rewarded. When Mosley later admitted to using performance-enhancing substances during portions of his career, it reinforced Duva's long-standing suspicion that boxing wasn't always fought on equal terms. While Mosley was widely respected, Duva saw any unfair advantage as betrayal of the sport's integrity. For Duva, fairness was sacred. Anything that compromised it, whether judging or substances, triggered fierce criticism. 6. Julio Cesar Chavez. Julio Cesar Chavez was a global icon, but Duva often criticized what he believed was preferential treatment surrounding megastars. In bouts connected to Duva's fighters, Chavez's popularity and influence became focal points of tension. Duva felt boxing politics sometimes shielded undefeated records and marketable champions. When close rounds went Chavez's way, Duva voiced his dissatisfaction publicly. This rivalry wasn't rooted in personal animosity toward Chavez himself, but in Duva's distrust of the system around him. To Lou Duva, boxing had to be earned round by round. When he sensed the scales tipping because of reputation, his temper flared. Lou Duva's so-called hatreds weren't about bitterness, they were about loyalty. He defended his fighters fiercely and believed boxing should reward skill, effort, and fairness above all else. In a sport filled with politics, Duva represented old-school passion. He shouted, protested, and sometimes even charged the ring. Not for drama, but because he believed deeply in protecting his corner. And that fire is exactly why Lou Duva remains one of the most unforgettable figures in boxing history.